Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhnio. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and right now I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of August the 4th. So please like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and leave your comments just below the video. So I'll start with some greetings. Greetings to Ukrainian Air Forces. That's serious thing. That's why I'm sitting with the T-shirt where is shown the rondel, the named rondel of Ukrainian Air Forces. That's because we have celebrated those special day and date of Ukrainian Air Forces yesterday. So yesterday I haven't been doing this review. So today I have to say real warm greetings to our pilots, to all representatives of Ukrainian Air Forces. Thank you for your duty. Let's begin battle map situation review. I'll start from an unexpected direction. That's Kherson, because in the Kherson region, quite logical and to some extent even dangerous events are currently taking place. What do they mainly consist of? According to the results of July, the Kherson direction showed a significant increase in combat activity from the enemy. The number of combat clashes initiated by the enemy here increased by 159% compared to the previous month. This 159% increase may sound like a fantastic figure, but in absolute terms, the number of attacks throughout the entire month was not that significant here in the Kherson region. There were only about 150, 160, maybe 170 attacks or so over the course of the month. Again, as I said, this isn't some fantastic figure, but it shows that the occupiers were carrying out about 5 or 6 attacks per day here throughout July. And this is a significant increase compared to what was being recorded in the Kherson region just a few months ago. What am I getting at? That the occupiers definitely have ambitions for Kherson, for the Kherson region. I've said more than once that these ambitions are simply unattainable. In other words, it's impossible for them to realize these ambitions, but the occupiers are not going to give them up. And just yesterday, as confirmation of these words, besides, by the way, the actual assault actions on the islands, the attempts to land troops, there was an enormous intensity of shelling in Kherson. This is precisely a consequence of the past month. Similarly, in July, up to 1,500 various strikes were carried out on the Kherson region, specifically on the right bank of Kherson, by Russian scum in their terrorization of our peaceful city, which unfortunately is on the front line of the struggle. And just recently, over the weekend, a significant event occurred. The Russians struck the Ostrivskyi Bridge. Here, as you can see on the deep state map, it is marked as the Ostriv neighborhood. In reality, it is called the Kora neighborhood. And I don't know which color, let me mark it in blue. There is a bridge here. It's a bridge over the Koshova River, and it was precisely this bridge that the occupiers subjected to very heavy bombardment. Here are some shots of these bombings that we can see, this very bridge and the strikes on it. Here is another angle of these shots from the Kherson Regional Military Administration. We can see that it's basically the same video montage, but from different angles. And the aftermath, the bridge is damaged. The bridge to the Korabel neighborhood is currently passable, but passage is difficult. And now the authorities of the Kherson region are essentially carrying out an evacuation of the population from these areas, particularly from this southern Korabel district, which is marked as Ostriv Island on the deep state map. This was mentioned yesterday by the head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, Oleksandr Prokudin. He said that in the Korabel district, there are currently about 1,800 people remaining, including 187 with limited mobility and 31 children. And it is precisely these people who will be evacuated from here. Why? We can clearly see that this is truly an isolated island-like district of Kherson, specifically the Korabel microdistrict, and its essential connection to the larger sprawling city is not established through a significant number of bridges, so to speak, which makes it quite distinct. It is precisely this bridge, the Ostrivskyi Bridge, which was struck, and its damage could be a sign, a symbol, that the occupiers have ambitions for this district. Because before carrying out, let's say, any operations involving a landing, for example, specifically in the Korabel district of Kherson, they need to isolate the logistics of this district. That is, to make the movement of armed forces, supplies, any actions here impossible. and only after that carry out the corresponding actions. That is, I'm not saying that these actions will necessarily be implemented. I'm only emphasizing that the enemy may have certain plans of this kind. That's the first thing. And secondly, we need to pay attention to such actions because strikes on bridges, strikes on cables on bridges, they don't just happen for no reason. Nothing happens just by chance. And here the enemy definitely has some plans, not to scare anyone, but I'm just highlighting this information because it's important to understand. Moreover, there's something else we're seeing right now. Friends, the enemy's drone system center called Rubikon, the very same Rubikon that deployed a huge number of fiber optic drones near Pokrovsk. And what we're witnessing now is essentially a logistical catastrophe happening near Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. This was made possible by the Russian military's innovation center, Rubikon. This is their advanced unit that utilizes these innovations. So Rubikon, this is important information in the context of the south, including Kherson. It may not directly concern Kherson, but it's something that needs to be taken into account. Rubicon has tested, is using, and has adopted USVs, uncrewed surface vessels. Here you can see video footage from the testing of these USVs. They conducted training, worked through scenarios, and are working on improvements. The main task assigned to these Russian USVs is to strike at our maritime infrastructure. Once again, I repeat, they were developed and adopted by the Russian Innovation Center, Rubikon. And this, damn it, is an extremely dangerous development. It must be talked about. This is confirmed by Serhiy Bezkresny, a well-known specialist in the field of technology. Because whatever Rubikon takes on, those who understand what Rubikon is, know that it can be brought to fruition. And this could be serious, and this could be on a large scale. In other words, we're talking about the fact that they could produce a lot of these sea drones, B-keys, unmanned boats, and simply terrorize our entire port infrastructure with them, launching them in the same kind of raids as they currently do with Shaheds on all our coastal territories, including carrying out terrorist strikes, even strikes on vacationers. Flash emphasizes this. Again, I want to say I'm not sure that this threat from the beaks specifically concerns Kherson, but in general, we should potentially expect increased maritime complications, and we definitely need to keep a close watch on the enemy and their unmanned boats here. By the way, another task of Rubikon, this Russian Military Innovation Center, is to study, in fact, the experience and practice of how the Ukrainian armed forces use unmanned maritime boats. How are they used and how can they be countered? This is what Rubikon is currently working on. And this is, well, predictably a worrying development. In addition, Flesh, whom I've already mentioned, also wrote on his Telegram channel the other day that he studied the situation in Kherson, talked to many soldiers about the frequencies and which drones the occupiers are using here. So Flesh notes that there is actually an increase in the number of FPVs operating in the 400-490 megahertz range.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
But in fact, electronic warfare needs to cover the entire range using the full set of EW tools to block different bands starting from 300 megahertz. And this also creates a load. This puts considerable strain on our defense on the right bank of the Kherson region. It's important to understand that difficult times lie ahead for us. I'm not saying that the occupiers might achieve any successes here. I'm not saying that they are storming Kherson. I'm not saying that they will seize bridgeheads. I'm simply saying that they are not giving up on their ideas, and they will continue, if not by force, then by any means possible, to terrorize these areas as much as they can. And I'll show you one more innovation today. Well, is it really an innovation? For now, it's some kind of strange gadget that the occupiers are developing. But we still need to keep an eye on them in order to understand where the enemy is heading. They've constructed some kind of vehicle that supposedly allows them to move through pipes. This is what it all looks like. Well, I mean, it's not a fact that a soldier would actually be able to move around on it, just like in this photo, in this screenshot. But theoretically, with something like this, well, it's almost like a ground-based robotic system. The occupiers could transport some cargo, explosives, or something else through the pipes because they're quite skilled at pipe warfare. We know that they often crawl into pipes to move around. And just yesterday, I even saw a call, an initiative suggesting that, especially in light of the upcoming exercises that are to take place in Belarus with concentrated Russian troops, We should mine absolutely all the pipes coming from hostile territories, from Russia and Belarus, along our northern borders. And specifically, we have the following. We have gas pipelines, and we also have other, primarily this is about gas pipelines, gas mains that are used by the Russians, or were previously used to pump their gas through our gas transmission system. And now when they are empty, as is well known, they have been completely empty since the beginning of this year, and we don't even have an agreement about this. It is necessary and would be desirable to mine all these sections of the pipelines in the areas marked with red circles. Because who knows, only they know what they use them for and why they are now developing such types of ground-based robotic systems, perhaps for a new escalation, including in the north. And regarding the northern regions, let's talk about the escalation in the Sumy region. Well, if you can call it an escalation. By the way, on the deep state map, there are several areas that aren't even marked as captured, but in reality, they have been taken by the enemy. In particular, as far as I know, based on the results of July, we can say that the settlement of Vasylivka has been captured. Why did the enemy need it? They tried to strike at the rear of our troops in Ostrivskyi in particular and in Volfine. For what purpose? In order to unsettle our defenders in the area of Tayotkin, Russian Tayotkin, which are Ukrainian guys in pixel camouflage, by the way, not in pixel anymore, but actually in multicam now, according to the new changes and orders, since our main uniform will no longer be pixel, but rather more in line with the European standard. But anyway, that's beside the point. Our guys in Tayotkin are destroying enemy forces in the greatest numbers possible. And as they move toward Vasylivka into the rear of our group, the enemy is trying to gain some advantages. Vasylivka, in fact, as of the beginning of August, was captured by the enemy. It was occupied, but this did not lead to any further developments for the Russians. Another settlement that was captured during July is Novokostyantinivka. Although you won't see it here on the deep state map, it still has its old name, Pershitravnya. Here in the area of Pershitravnya or Novokostyantinivka, the enemy was also present. However, their status has changed recently. As even Russian public channels themselves claim, in Novokostyantinivka, Russian troops are completely cut off from their own logistics. That is, the units there are consolidated units of the 40th and 155th Marine Brigades. And they are sitting there basically without any supplies. They are in operational encirclement. Similar trends of gradual operational encirclement are starting to develop for the Russians in Yunakivka and the Sadi area. Sadi is a settlement right here, Sadki, towards which the Russians have made gains over the past month. And Yunakivka, where the Russians have also made advances over the past month. The point is that our UAV operators have essentially cut off the enemy's rear positions. And now all these enemy advances that exist here are running into a kill zone we've established, something similar to the Rubikon the enemy created for us near Pokrovsk. In the same way, we've set up a kill zone for the occupiers along these designated movement routes stretching 15 to 20 or even more kilometers deep. And in fact, the Russians here are essentially in operational encirclement because our drones are cutting them off in this area. So the overall trend, the general situation in the Sumy region is improving. I also want to address two other directions in today's review. This is Pokrovsk. There haven't been any significant changes here. None have been recorded. But there is an interesting detail, you could say a point of interest. Yesterday, the 3rd Brigade of the National Guard, called Spartan, a Ukrainian rapid response brigade, announced that for the first time in its experience, it has started to observe female assault troops on the Pokrovsk front. That is, women assault soldiers, whom the Russians have begun sending into so-called female meat assaults. And yesterday, one such female fighter was eliminated by soldiers of the 3rd Rapid Response Brigade, Spartan. But they say that in their experience, this is the first time they've seen this. Previously, they've seen assault troops with crutches, former prisoners, occupiers under the influence of drugs. But this is the first time they've seen women in these meat assaults. I'll say this, it's nothing new. I've seen this footage. I may not have posted all of it here or even on my Telegram channel, by the way, which friends I encourage you to subscribe to. Here you can see how to find it on Telegram, is Pekhnio News. So look it up and subscribe. But the Russians had already used female convicts earlier in the Lysivka direction at the positions of the 25th Airborne Brigade. I know this, let's say, from primary sources, directly from those who were involved in eliminating these convicts. So, regarding what the brigade is now reporting, the 3rd Operational Brigade Spartan, we'll see whether this will have any large-scale, significant effect, or if it's just a single stray female fighter from the Russian Federation who has appeared in this sense on the Pokrovsk direction. Let's talk in more detail today about Novopavlivka, because the Russians currently have essentially 3 or 4 main points of tension here. These are Zeleny High, the Iskra area, Oleksandrorad, and the area of Voskresenka and Malivka in the Zaporizhzhia region. No, I'm sorry, this is Dnipropetrovsk. Malivka is Dnipropetrovsk region. So what is happening all over here? Spark, let's start with it. Iskra is a very inconvenient area for attacks, for frontal assaults by the enemy, because there is the Vovcha River here, a rather deep river, and crossing it will be quite difficult. Moreover, the right bank of the Vovcha River, the western bank, is higher than the left bank. And that's exactly why the occupiers will face a very difficult situation here if they decide to move forward with a frontal assault, which is rather unlikely. That is why we are now seeing an attempt in the Iskra area to bypass it through Zeleny High towards Ivanivka, aiming to get into the rear, or through Dakhne to Filia, also with the goal of flanking. So what is actually happening right now in Zeleny High? Once again, these are premature claims of capturing the settlement by the Russians. Premature claims are those that haven't actually happened, but where the Russians have planted a flag and staged this flag planting event, just like they did last week in Chasiv Yar. And this in particular was highlighted and revealed by deep state analysts who showed that on the western outskirts, the Russians planted a flag. Their 36th separate motorized rifle brigade put up the flag. The very next day, fighters from the Timur Center, We Fight for Ukraine, and the Bratstvo Special Unit already confirmed at that same spot that the flag was no longer there. It's just nonsense. There are no occupiers there. And this is yet another clear example of flag planting, which the Russians are engaging in here on the Novopavlivka front. Right now, their main objective is undoubtedly to reach the Dnipropetrovsk region, to cross the borders of Donetsk region in order to achieve their ambitious and propagandistic goal. And the main points where they potentially have the greatest successes are Malivka from the Voskresenka area and Dakhne, which is already in the gray zone anyway. And there, the enemy should note that they are, in principle, present, although they are constantly being driven out. However, so far, in a global sense, no breakthroughs by the enemy into the Dnipropetrovsk region have been recorded. Well, friends, thank you for your attention. With that, I will wrap up today's review. Take care of yourselves. All the best, and see you next time.